Nancy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Like, I'm excited to be here.
No, thank you. Thank you for sparking this conversation before hitting the record button that probably was going to put us on a complete different tangent, but I'm glad that we're able to finally pick it up from where we left off.
Yes.
Before we kind of get into this word and this topic that we chose, and that is compass, and more so the compass as it relates to the bigger picture that we have for our lives. I want to give you a chance to briefly introduce yourself by answering the rather loaded question, or the $1 million question that we all get asked, and that is, who are you? For some of our listeners who are not familiar with your story.
That's great. Thank you, Alec. Yeah, I'm excited to be on this show and this call with you. My name is Nancy John. I am, in a nutshell, I would say, a coach, a trainer, a consultant. I own Seed Leadership, the founder of that company where we provide leadership development resources and training to organizations as well as up and coming leaders. I'm also a podcast host. So that's a podcast that I started earlier this year, Relational Introvert, which, if anybody knows my story, has been all about running the experiment. It is all about the pure joy of the process,
Mm,
which has actually been an amazing learning experience for me, a source of creativity that I actually hadn't anticipated. So yeah, it's been a really great journey for me, and I'm excited to be able to share that with other people, because I find that that has actually helped me in building bridges and connections with a lot of different people that I never anticipated was possible.
hmm
But yeah, so my background, I like, from a professional perspective, I have been a learning and development professional for over 15 years. So working in different corporations and companies, and started up my own practice last year. So it has
hmm
been a journey to start something fresh and start something new. And I've learned a lot. Not, I mean, I don't just mean business wise, about myself, in ways that I don't think, again, I had anticipated.
hmm
Has That's what's shown up for me, and I'm very excited about where I continue to go with
hmm
this.
Do you feel like you become a little bit of an extrovert through the podcast and talking
You
about
know,
introvert topics? Because what I've learned is that it's one of those things where it's like introvert, and maybe we just don't have a good enough understanding of what it means to be an introvert. But
yeah.
through just talking and sharing to different people, I've noticed where I was 5 years ago, and that is being terrified of getting into a public stage and speaking in front of other people, to actually feeling like that's my home now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's really interesting you bring that up. I think what you shared around the misconception of introverts is a really important piece, because I feel a lot of times the misconception that still exists is that introverts are shy, like all introverts are shy or don't want to be in front of people or can't do public speaking. And I think it's important to recognize the spectrum on which we all lie. There's some of us who are extremely introverted and some of us who are extremely extroverted, but somewhere along that spectrum we all sit. And
Mm,
I have, like, from my personal experience, I have always been comfortable speaking in front of people. I've been like that since I was a kid. I remember being really young. I don't know if anyone else has this experience where, your parents, like, if you can sing, they say, well, sing. Like when you have a family gathering, they're like, sing or dance or whatever, right? They get you to do these things. I was that kid. Like, I was the one where my dad would be like, oh, sing. Or I was really good at telling jokes. I just really liked, I think I would realize that I enjoyed entertaining people to some degree, like making them laugh. So I was the one that would, go around telling jokes and things like that. So that was always a part of me. And I think that's when people find out that I'm an introvert innately, they're like, no, you're not. You have no issues being in front of people. And I think that's the misconception. What um what's I would say what's true to me as an introvert that is to everybody else, and maybe this is one that you relate to as well, is
Mhm.
we need a pause, in the sense where when I'm in front of people, and when I'm like in a, let's even say I'm running a training session, I love when I'm there. I love it. I love what I'm doing, but I have given in all my energy. So when I'm done with it, I need to be like, I need to step away. I need some time alone. I just need to veg. I don't want to spend any time talking. Like, I just need to recharge myself. Whereas the more extroverted people are like, give me more. Like, I want the being with the people is what really engages them. I was actually
Uh-huh.
having a conversation with an extrovert earlier this week, and he said, he goes, I'm losing my battery. Like I need to be around people. And I was just like, oh, how weird. Like I'm feeling, I'm okay. Like I'm missing my family and friends. I'm missing the connection, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not necessarily losing my energy per se as somebody else would. What the
Mm-hmm.
podcast experience has given me is just, what it's helped me more than as an introvert is it's more around insecurities.
Mm.
It's helped me to put myself more publicly in a certain place. Same with doing videos, for example, putting up videos on LinkedIn. I started doing that last year. And in my personal life, I'm not posting up a bunch of my things on Instagram. Like I'm more a creeper on Instagram than I'm a poster of anything, right? But I realized the value of being present so people could
Mm-hmm.
just get a gauge for who I am. And so the video and the podcast and everything, what it's helped me with is just to face some insecurities, to push past comfort zones, so
Mm.
that it's just increased my capacity and my belief in what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that that had anything to do with introvert or extrovert, because I feel that extroverts have these insecurities as well, and they too have probably the same things around. Ooh, can I do this? I'm not sure I can do this. Is
Mm-hmm.
anyone going to listen? So that's what it's done more for me. It's
Mm-hmm.
more around my insecurities and my own comfort zones that it's pushed me.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that because I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings as far as what is an introvert and what is an extrovert. Because I've had conversations with both, and probably still do on a daily basis. Because it's not like we wear a name tag saying extroverted or introvert. It's something that you figure out over time. And what I've always wondered is that for those who choose to create platforms from the introvert perspective, my assumption was that they were trying to become more extroverted, but really it's how you put it, as far as you're just creating a space. You're still who you are, but you're allowing yourself to step into the unknown and ultimately find ways to cope and better understand your own life, your own perspectives, and your own, like you said, insecurities.
Yes.
Because and to your point, I think we all have that, because at the end of the day we're all human, right?
Yes.
And most humans, in my opinion, were imperfect human beings. And so it's, if not all, let's put it that way.
Yeah. I was going to say, which perfect do you know? Please introduce me.
So it's all part of the journey, I think, of just creating those opportunities. And I'm kind of curious to know, you dove into this a little bit as far as the different skills that you've been able to identify about yourself that you have. How did those play as part of your bigger picture? And maybe even before answering that question, how did you even get to the concept of understanding what your big picture was in life?
Hmm. That's a really interesting question, Oleg, because I feel I'm still in the process of it.
Mm-hmm.
I be honest, I've always been envious of people who've been so clear around, I know this is what the vision is, this is what my purpose is. And I don't know that I've always had that clarity. And I feel I'm coming to terms with, it's okay that I don't have it all. And that part of my, um, part of it's, for me, it's the process of getting there. You know, I've never been someone, whenever anyone's done we do this vision activities, right? And I've also led these, so I kind of know. You do, where you say, imagine your life 10 years from now. What can you
Right.
see? What can you smell? Like, it's really about trying to be present to it right now. Like, it's almost like envisioning it and bringing it about right now. For whatever reason, I've always had a hard time with that exercise, because I was like, I feel like everybody was like drawing these amazing things and writing these amazing things down. I'd be like, I don't know. I'm not really seeing anything. And I was just like, am I not visionary? Do I not have any thoughts of what I want? And what I realized was that I do. And I've come to recognize that for me, it's not always a clear picture. And it's the odd thing for me is that I'm somebody who does want clarity. And I mean, like most people, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
want to have more clarity, but I've never had that crystal clearness around purpose in that way. And so for me, it's an ongoing journey. And I'm coming to appreciate that. I'm coming to appreciate that I don't know it all, and that the process of the uncovering, the digging,
Uh-huh.
is a fun thing too. Like, you know, like there is something in that, like the inquiry of the curiosity around it. So, I mean, earlier in the call, I mentioned like for me, when I think about bigger purpose
Mm-hmm.
from a faith perspective, that's a big part for me. And I think
Mm-hmm.
about, um, you know, for me, when I think about purpose, I really look to see, like how did Jesus emulate his life. So for me,
Mm-hmm.
service, the word service has been, I feel for whatever reason, it's always rung true with me to some degree or another. How do you serve others? What does it look like to serve in a meaningful way, in an impactful way? But that's such a broad stroke, right?
Right.
It's such a broad stroke to talk about service. And what I'm coming to realize is, so I kind of look to see when I think about bigger purpose, I've realized that I kind of look at Christ as the bigger purpose, and all these other things are a stem from that. And the cool thing of that is it's not one dimensional. Like when I'm pursuing this bigger purpose with Christ, I'm kind of, he's the bigger picture for me that
Right.
allows for a lot of different, like a lot of different opportunities. And so when I think about service, I think about where am I uniquely positioned to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise for you, where are you uniquely positioned to serve? So rather than me being like, oh, I really like how Oleg does it, I want to be Oleg. It's
Mm-hmm.
how can I actually say, well, what are you uniquely gifted with? There, we all have these God-given things that we're given. And I look to that to say, how does that fit into um, my bigger picture? Like when I
Mm-hmm.
look at the life of Christ, like how does that fit into service in that way? But I'm not bounded by it must look so, because
Mm-hmm.
the process of me growing and evolving means that all of that is evolving. So I just need to be present to where I am now. And
Mm-hmm.
that's been the learning for me, to be honest, in finding purpose in the now, and kind of looking at, based on where I am now, how further out can I look without needing to look 20 years out, right? Like some people just have a vision to see that far out. I don't. And that's just the way I operate.
Mm-hmm.
But I know the idea of like service under the umbrella of Christ, like that sits right for me. So I
Mm-hmm.
kind of rely on that as my sort of bigger pictures. So when you
Mm-hmm.
talked about compass, like that's my compass
Mm-hmm.
for how I operate. But yeah, I don't know that I know this is exactly what purpose looks like. It's a journey for me. I just keep my eye on like the bigger picture as I move forward.
Well, and as part of you sharing, what came to mind for me is the ability and the necessity to be open minded. I think
Yes.
if you stay open minded, and that's kind of how I'm actually choosing to approach this particular conversation and what we're talking about. So part of my understanding of what purpose was once upon a time was that you have to have this set or defined thing for what it is, such as at the time I thought, okay, it had to be events, it had to be a podcast, it had to be a place where people can share their stories. But
Mm,
since what I've learned is that those three things have actually been redefined into, it just has to be an experience. And what it actually does is, because it still takes the form of a more general shape, it gives you a chance to stay curious and evolve that experience.
yes.
So, and the thing that you mentioned about the years, the 5 to 10 year plan, I struggle with that. I no, true. I don't understand it the way that other people understand it. So when someone asks me, "What is your 5 year plan?" I say, "I have no idea, but here's what I envision. Here's
Right.
what I plan." Because I think the concept of time, it's 5 year plan. It When I hear of it, it makes me think that I can control those entire 5 years,
Mm,
but in reality, I can't. So in 5 years, I may envision and putting on 20 events, but I've also know through past experience that I can do 11 in a year.
mm,
So why can't I do 50 in five
mm,
years, right?
right.
So it's one of those things where I think the importance of staying open minded and defining your own purpose and however you see it. But I think the general approach for me has worked the best, because at the core of it, if I'm trying to create an experience, then it also keeps me to other options that an experience could look like. An experience
Yes.
is not only a podcast interview, it's not only an event, it's not only this. It could be something that's completely foreign to you right now.
Yes.
It's an
Yes.
experience.
I really appreciate what you said around experience is, so when we look at podcast, when we look at events, even when I think about, my own company, Seed Leadership, I've come to recognize that these are all just vehicles
Yeah.
to something. They actually they're not who I am. They're just a vehicle, like a portion of. So when I talk about being in service, it is one way that we do that. It's not
Mm-hmm.
the way. And I like what you said about experience, because it's, it allows you enough flexibility in that plan. And it's funny when we talk about 5-year plans and stuff, like really when I think about a lot of the work that I do and I've done in the past in my career, we did a lot of planning, a lot of business planning and things like that. um and I and it's one of those things where you're faced with the norm of how these things are done. Like this is the best practice around business planning, is how we do it. And then I'm faced with the reality of how I feel about it
Yeah.
and how I'm supposed to adapt it. So in one of my previous companies that I worked for, I worked with a lot of new business owners, and we would help them with time management, time blocking. And I remember at that time, we would give guidance around time blocking, be as specific as you can be. So, like from 9 to 10, I'm going to do blah, 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 from 11 to 12, blah, blah, like you just kind of map it out. But even then I remember thinking, I don't know that I could live by this,
Yeah.
right? Like I make,
It seems very
it's value.
robotic.
Yes. And I actually, so it was one of these things where I had to realize that it's not that it's wrong or it doesn't work. It does work, but it didn't give enough room for flexibility. And so
Yes.
it was this balance between understanding flexibility and becoming, I think I was battling with the flexibility and laziness, because it's easy. If you give so much flexibility, then I was just like, well, then I'm just going to be like flopping around, and I won't follow through on anything. So it
Mm-hmm.
was just this piece of like figuring out what works. And um, so the idea of business planning, there's so many methods out there, and I value them because there is such value in creating a discipline around planning. I'm not one to say don't plan. I value planning. Uh, but it's how strict you get with your plan. There's some who are amazing at keeping, like they are, I wake up at 5:15 to 5:45, and
Yeah.
they live by that. And I actually, when I see people like that, I very much admire it. I'm like, whoa, how do you do it that way? I just don't operate like that. For me, I'm like, if it's that stringent, I give myself no room for error. And no room for error means that if I do create make a mistake or don't follow through, then I'm feeling guilty. And so it's this idea of figuring out, how do you plan in a way that allows, as you said, for experience, and allows for it and still has discipline around it. And I feel that's something I'm working out. I don't have an answer for what that looks like in my life. I'm working it out. But what I'm realizing is the journeying of it is also kind of cool, which is
Yeah.
not something I probably would have said if you'd asked me a year ago. I would have been much more of an end result person, and I'm starting to enjoy going through the process as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Well, I think part of routines, what I'm learning is this, and I had a similar challenge, I think, when it comes to the different time block. I've been exposed to so many different techniques through the number of interviews where sometimes it becomes a little bit overwhelming as far as which one do you choose to act on and implement
Yes.
and test. And what I've actually learned recently that works well for me is writing down the routine that I want to have. So I start off read, journal, meditate, and then write. So I do some sort of article or content based off of what I've learned. And what really clicked for me was this. I listened to a video. It was Jordan Peterson, and he
Mhm.
was asked this question of there was a person in the audience. I think he was speaking to a college auditorium. Person in the audience got up and he said, "How do I be like you as a communicator? What can I
Mm.
start doing today?" And he said three things: read, write, and speak. Read more than what you know, write so you can process your own thoughts, and speak to continue to work on communication and energy and
Mm.
everything that comes with it. So once I understood that, and this is a recent discovery, it literally just made sense. So I went to kind of my drawing board and I wrote down the things that I wanted to do. And I've noticed that I'm actually at so much ease now with it than I ever was, because my intention is to get up at 4 or 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning. Well, sometimes I get up at 8. And then that's the challenge, is if you had
Yes.
from 4 to 8 blocked off completely, and then the thought is that, well, damn, I'm gonna have to wait till next Monday to start this, which is crazy. It's like 6 more
Yes.
days. And so what I just realized is that it's just more important to know and have that bigger picture
Mm.
of what you're trying to accomplish. And then through it, just let the experience of life be that platform through which you can just enjoy it. I get up at 8 and I still go through the thing. I remember
Mm.
the first time I woke up, or I guess last week, I woke up past the intended time. Alarm didn't go off or something like that. And my first thought was, that sucks. I just missed
Mm.
3 hours of reading and all
Productivity.
of that.
Yes.
Exactly. And all of a sudden, like, I'm feeling guilt. My first thought, I'm feeling
Mm.
guilty and embarrassed
Mm.
and not disciplined. And
Mm.
then I just had another thought the same exact moment. I said, so what? Just do it. Do it right
Right.
now. And what I actually noticed was, just by starting to do it, I accomplished those things probably 2 or 3 times faster,
Mm.
because I cut down all of the external things that I would do, get up and snack in between, and all
Yes.
of these distractions, or check your phone, but rather
Yes.
just got focused on like 2 or 3 tasks at hand, and
Yes.
felt so fulfilled. So I think I like your point of having the bigger picture, but then also understanding that it's each time you get up is going to be its own unique experience.
Yes. So I'm curious, with your experience, have you
Hmm.
found that the simplifying of it is what helped you? So it's
Yeah.
just read, write, speak, like, okay.
Yeah, I just simplified it into very simple categories. So I read and I just set a goal for one chapter, however
So
long
it's
that
not a
chapter may
time
be.
thing. It's not
It's
a
not a
time thing
time.
for you.
No,
Okay.
it's not a time thing. And when I used to do the time thing, I actually felt almost impatient sometimes, because when the hour hits
Mm.
and I'm like 3 pages away from finishing that chapter, like, okay, I'm gonna have to somehow resume this with the same level of thinking tomorrow,
Mm.
which is really, in my opinion, it's not possible, because you're
Right.
going to be influenced by so many different things over the course of that day, where
Right.
it literally is impossible for you to come with the same exact being and
Right.
state of mind that following morning.
Right.
So instead, what I just said is, I'm going to commit to one chapter a day, however long
Yes.
that takes, 15
Yes.
minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, and then you get into the other things. And I think that's the beauty of life, and keeping an open mind perspective, is that through it, I was able to find my own routine.
Yeah.
Time blocking didn't work.
Mm.
So I just always question, like, there's got to be something that works. I mean,
Yes.
I'm different, but I'm not that different from other people.
Yes.
There's got to be a way to figure it out.
I really like what you're saying. It's almost like it's making me go back and think about like how I approach it. Like I said, for me, this is a work in progress. So I'm figuring it out as I go. And I have a lot of people who ask me a lot of times, like, oh, how do you manage your time? I'm like, well,
Hmm.
I'm learning it as I'm doing it. Um, but the thing that's now similar to your learning and my learning, and I feel for a lot of other people, is I would encourage people simplify. Whatever it is you think you can accomplish in a day, reassess it, like cut it down by whatever you have on your list, because I'm guilty of this. I feel that I can accomplish, I'm like, I can accomplish everything,
Hmm.
but the reality is that I end up accomplishing them to like what, to this much degree, because I've just put so much on there. So the idea of simplifying it to just like that, read, write, speak, or meditate, read, whatever those things might be, I feel a simplification of it is really powerful. And I also feel the one thing that from my time blocking days that I absolutely agree, like I'm like, this stands true still, is think about the things that would energize you personally. Like when we use the words like self-care and everything, but I'm just saying, like, what would give you energy? Make sure that that is a thing that you have as part of your read, write, like that needs to be on your simplified list. So whether that's working out, whether that is I need to meditate, I need to, write, whatever that
Uh-huh.
might be for you. I feel that needs to be on your simple list, because if it's always about just the work that you need to do, um, that's where we actually don't fuel ourselves. And I feel that when you don't have the fuel, the opportunity to actually then have the energy, like
Yeah.
internal energy to keep going, the opportunity to actually learn from it. So I can only imagine, like, when we are fueling ourselves, we're our creativity sparking. We're like, oh, I could do this another way. I can
Hmm.
probably, and you just kind of think about it differently. So those are two things that I would say I'm noticing from just my own, like, now having spoken to you as well. Like, I feel like, oh, those two things ring true. Keep it simple, and have like, start with energy, like what gives you energy. Like, don't miss that for all the to-dos, because the
Yeah.
to-dos will always be there.
Hmm.
um yeah, that's actually
And
really good.
and with the energy, what I'm learning and trying to do, so I'm the same exact way. I mean, I'm looking at a list right now with 20 different things, and I never in my life have gone through all 20. I think the closest I've done is like 17 or something.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and that was a once in a lifetime thing that
I
has
hope you
happened.
took a
Usually,
picture.
usually it's half of that. But what I'm learning is, even as it comes to that list and the energy, and you bring up a really good point. So what I started to do when I understood that particular aspect is you have to do the things that energize you. Is I started to break down the list, and let's say if you have 9 things, every third or every fourth line is going to be something that I must to re-energize myself. Whether it's work out,
Oh.
walk the dog, meditate. So I don't chunk them together. I break them up into increments so that as I
Hmm.
get through 3 things of work or what seems to be like tasks, then I can do something that gives me that boost again.
Right.
And then I can kind of get back to the flow once again. And for every person, it's going to work differently. I know for me, it's worked tremendously because whenever I would feel a level of, okay, the day is over, and it would be 11 a.m. in the morning because I've worked
Yes.
so hard at the things. I just know that this is where I have to take that break. This is where I have
Yes.
to re-energize myself or give myself kind of more food essentially
Yes.
for your brain.
Well, and that's actually really good. I feel like this is also an encouragement to anyone who's listening, is to say,
Hmm.
there, you have to try it. Right. And so I would say, like, you don't have to take our word for whatever we're sharing. Like, you have to
Right.
try it, because each of us physically and emotionally, mentally, like, figures it out, but you don't know until you actually, and that's why I think the things that you mentioned about Jordan Peterson, the speak aspect really stands out to me, because that is just the trying of it. Like, go and
Exactly.
speak. Like, partly, if you want to be a better communicator, outside of this prepping and planning and processing, you got to go and do it. So for me, when I think about even this idea of time blocking, a couple years ago, I was reading this book by, I believe the author's name is Laura Vanderkamp, and she is, her whole expertise is around time. She's like a time guru, and her
Uh-huh.
book was called 168 Hours, because that's how many hours we have in a week. And the big premise of what she was getting at was to say, you have more time than you actually think. So when we say things like, I
Mm.
don't have time, I've come to realize that the reality behind it usually is that it's just not a priority for me. Whatever this thing is that I said I was going to do, I don't do it because I prioritize something. Now, there'd be a lot of reasons why I prioritize something else, but that's reality of what happened. But one exercise that she would encourage everybody to do as part of a realize your pattern process was, 1 week, just time everything, like, as in, write down everything you do. So from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, just start jotting them down. So, oh, I woke up at 5:30, worked out 30 minutes, like, just keep writing them down. And so I did that. And I actually chose to do it for 2 weeks, because sometimes, I was just like, it was an odd week for me. I was having some extra amount of trainings and stuff happening that was throwing off
Hmm.
my week. So I said, let me do 2 weeks and map it out. And it was a really great exercise, because it did two things, learnings I got from there. One was, when I was conscious of what I was doing, I was very wise about what I was using my time
Oh
on. Because
yeah.
as soon as I wrote it down, I was just like, what the heck am I doing right now? And so that was like a aha moment, because I became very present to how I was using time. The second thing that I noticed about my pattern was that I had very little to no breaks during my work time. I
Mm.
was literally going from one thing to the next and the next thing. And I actually had a coworker who probably maybe a year prior to that or something, we were just kind of being like, like peer mentors to each other. And I was asked, he's pretty good with time and stuff. I said, tell me a little bit about how you do time management. He goes, do you mind? Can I see your calendar? I'm like, sure. I opened up my calendar and he goes, Nancy, the first thing that shows up for me is you have no think time. You just go from this thing to that. I'm like, yeah, that's true. So when
That's a
it was
really
just a
good
reminder
idea.
for me that I was just like not giving myself any. And the thing is, I'm like, I need time to think. I knew that for me to actually be at my best, to bring my best to anything, I needed a space in between to process. So you and I have a great meeting.
Mhm.
Let's say we have some takeaways from that. I need some time to step away from it, to write it down. Similar to you, I'm a bit of a like I like to write to process a few things out. But who shows up after that is a very different person. Like I'm in a different headspace when I show up, but I wasn't giving myself that. I was just going next. So then when I got home, all I wanted to do was watch TV. I just wanted to eat. Like I didn't, because I hadn't given myself any space in between. And that's where I started to realize I think I put a lot more on my plate than is needed. It's not because I can't accomplish it. I can accomplish it, but what's the purpose of me accomplishing it? What's the purpose of all of these things? And so that exercise really helped me to take a step back, and reinforce these things about simplify what you're looking to accomplish in your day, because you wanting to do these 5 things, they probably wouldn't happen today anyways. You're going
Right.
to feel bad about it, and then you're going to be like, I can't do this, right? Like we just keep regurgitating that mind frame again and again. So I just was like, how can I simplify this? What might be the most important, like what would be the most important 1 or 2 things? And I think those principles have held true when we think about, Brian Tracy and, eat the frog. Like that's pretty much what it is. Eat like the most uncomfortable thing that you need to do. Now that's work related, but I say definitely have, like you did, have like what energizes you, because if your entire day is just eating frogs, then you're going to throw up at some point, right? Like
Seriously.
that's not
Yeah.
a way to live either. So there is a balance in here, but we got to try it. And I think you just got to try a few things, figure out what works for you, and go with that, right? Like
Hmm.
in the end, we know what we're looking to look, what's the bigger picture we're working towards. And
Hmm.
we'll realize if we're going towards that or not. And if we're not, then there's something else there.
Hmm.
It's nothing to do with time.
And I think part of trying, one thing that I'll add on to that is trying, but also trying consciously. If you think about how you and I even mentioned the fact that, oh, I don't have time. I've said that phrase, I don't know how many times, millions probably
Yeah.
by now, as I'm sure you have. And it's one of those things. I think what ends up happening is that oftentimes I didn't even recognize that I was
Mm,
saying that I don't have time. It was more so, I think what ends up happening is that I was so influenced by my environment. There was a time in my life where I was in environments where it didn't give me the chance to grow in the same areas or same ways that I'm growing now. And
mm,
so the phrases of, I don't have time, I can't do this, it's not possible, I can't change, or the norm or the everyday language. And the
right.
challenge that I think becomes in living in such environments is that it's very difficult to break through because you don't even know that there's the other side that's possible.
Right.
It's something, I think language is beautiful because it's something that you have to really feel and see like one result, and then it sets you on the track that, oh, maybe I can change the wording around how I manage stress, how I manage
Yes.
anxiety, how I manage
Yes.
shame, guilt, embarrassment. And the thing that you brought up and what resonated with me is I don't have time, is I think oftentimes I would say that without even noticing that I'm saying that because I'm just programmed.
Yes.
And so I don't really challenge that thought anymore.
Yes.
Same exact reason you get up in the morning, you brush your teeth. You don't fight with that reality.
No.
You just do it.
Yes.
But then the thing that I've recently begun to do, and Brian Kelly is exceptional at this as far as being conscious of what he says,
Mm,
is it just made me realize one day him and I were talking and I was sharing with him the joy that I got from learning something new, like sweeping the floor, and instead of pushing it as hard as I can so the broom breaks, but doing it lightly and actually
yes.
having it be more effective. And I realized the same thing, how important it is. I mean, think about even the concept of waking up in the morning and brushing your teeth. And instead of doing it with the right hand, what if you do it with your left? What changes? Or
Yes.
so I think the importance of that is knowing that there's always going to be something new to learn, but you literally just have to try it.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. There's
Yes.
no right, there's no wrong. It just is. That's why I think the beauty of platforms like this is that people can just openly share,
Yes.
and there's no criteria. I'm not sitting here and marking off, oh, Nancy said that one, -1. I'm not doing that.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the thing that I would love to challenge people is to just be more open-minded to the different things that could be possible in your life.
Absolutely. It's really interesting. I talked about my podcast being this whole experiment of or whole process of running the experiment. Like that actually came from Kevin Monroe, right? Like he says that frequently. And I remember one time he shared it, it's really just stuck with me. And I think it came at a time when I was at a place to receive it and to do something with it. And that's kind of how my podcast was born. It's not because I'm some sort of professional podcaster or anything. It was because purely for that reason of trying something. And so even as I think about, I'm going to be launching my, season 2 soon and everything, and I was kind of sharing a little bit behind the scenes, and my encouragement to everybody is, as someone who has done this, so it's not even someone who, I'm not talking theoretically, as someone who really needed to know, like the idea of like, I need to know what that looks like. I need to kind of have
Yeah.
that planned. And um, I don't say that as a way to knock planning. Like I said, there's value in planning. There's value in looking forward. I'm a forward looking person,
Hmm.
but there's this balance between where we get stuck in just the thinking about it.
Hmm.
And to your point, I want to encourage people to be like, what's something that you've actually really had on your mind to try?
Yeah.
And whatever that might be, if it's whether you thought, well, I don't have enough money to do it, I don't have enough talents to do it, I don't have enough time to do it, whatever
Yeah.
that might be, I would just encourage to be like, just like jump into it and see what might happen. And it doesn't mean it'll be perfect, but if that's the pursuit, then it won't happen anyways.
Exactly.
um, but if you were just like, I just want to try it, I want to just give it a shot, I want to just try it, I really encourage people to do it, especially the time that we're all in right now. I've
Hmm.
said this to a few people, for whatever reason, because we're going through a global event right now. Everybody's questioning, everybody's in this place of like, well, I don't know, can we do this, can we do that? And I said, if there was ever a time of the least amount of judgment to try something,
It is now.
now is the time, because everyone's
Yeah.
kind of going, I don't know, I don't know. So I'm like, well, then jump right in, because there'll be more likelihood that people are going to be more curious than judgmental during this time. So yeah, like I feel like there's such an opportunity to keep trying. And from my own life, I can say when you try it in one area, you kind of be like interested to be like, what else could I do?
Yeah.
What else
Hmm.
can I do? Right. And it's actually pretty awesome to be in that
Hmm.
place.
And part of that, what I've learned is this is in the sole act of trying, it put it in perspective as far as the thought that, oh, I, c- I can't do this or I can't do that. Here's the truth that I've learned about thoughts is that whatever that one thought that you have, there's always the possibility for the exact opposite at the same exact time. Same exact time. You don't even have to
Yes.
wait for it. You have
Yes.
that thought of, I've never done this, I can't do it, I never am going to start this. At the same exact time, you have the possibility to think, I can do it now, it's possible, and I can make it
Mhm.
happen. I think that's the beauty of the human mind is that no circumstance, in my opinion, is permanent. Everything is temporary. I mean, you have thousands of thoughts that pass through your mind every single day, and you choose which one you kind of pull down, nibble on, and then let it go.
Yes.
You actually make a conscious choice in some cases. Some happen
Yes.
unconsciously, and you just kind of pick them up or you go through it. But I think that's the important to pass on to anyone that's looking to start anything new. And one of the things that I'm actually going to share later today is an article that I wrote on how I started the podcast. I started it from my apartment closet. True story. Started in an apartment closet, pushed all the clothes to one side of the of the closet. So they were all behind the computer. And I hung one picture in the background. And the comments that I received as far as how professional it looked, or just people oftentimes were saying, wow, like what an office. That's incredible that you were able to move into an office in year one of operations. I never revealed the full story that I'm actually in the closet and I'm looking at all, my whole
Quotes.
wardrobe in front of me here. But it's amazing to see that you just start doing, and you learn. You're going to figure out things that you didn't know. And the best part of it all is that if it doesn't work out, well, A, it's not working out to your assumption, but B, you're going to grow from it,
Yes.
because change happens inevitably.
Yes. Well, I love, okay, so you're gonna laugh. Your closet story.
Uh
My I just recorded a video.
huh.
It's my sneak peek, because I was like, I want to share with people if they're getting blocked and I don't have this, I don't have that. My
Right.
sneak peek, I just recorded, because majority of my audio is majority of my podcast is audio based.
Uh huh.
So listening experience was something I knew, even if I was just like, I invested in one mic, like that's the only investment I made, because the listening experience is what I was curious,
Right.
like I wanted to make sure I could provide. But I just recorded a behind the scenes video to post in my closet, because just like you, I was just like, well, where can I get the best audio quality? I'm like, I'll get it in my closet, because I have all these clothes
Yes.
here and all the fabric. And that's exactly what I did. I was just like, let me show you my recording studio. And I just kind of did a flip and said,
Yeah.
it's my closet. Like that's what it is. I'll sit in here and I'll do my final cut in here. And I have no investment I have to make in that. And the reason I want to share is just because what you said is so people know that it doesn't all have to fit in. Like it's not perfect. It's not perfect.
And no one
But
cares.
and nobody cares. And secondly, I think I realized early on that was not my pursuit either. And I think that
Mm,
helped, is that with the podcast, my pursuit wasn't for it to be perfect. I actually went purely into be like, I'm going to experiment this. I'm going to try it. And it's just really made me excited about the creativity around it. It's made me
yeah.
want to explore different platforms that probably, if you had just told me, Nancy, go and explore them, I probably would have been like, I don't really want to explore it. But because I'm doing something with it, I'm like, oh, now I'm curious. And when I see someone else try something, I'm like, oh, how did you do that? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I really like that. How could I do that? Like, it's making me aware
Yeah.
to want to see how others do it too. And it's actually been really cool in that way. So I love your closet story, because that's my exact, that's my exact story.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it all, is just giving it a shot, and from there you learn the things that you had to learn internally, and I think it only strengthens your belief and your confidence that you can do the same exact thing in a lot of other areas of
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
You can continue moving forward. I mean, when you think about when the concept of parenting clicked to me, as far as my parents aren't actually perfect human beings, and that they
Mhm.
were learning every single day, just like I was learning to be a kid, they were learning to be a parent and still are. It helped me rethink and understand that, hey, this concept of life, and the I think the ideal image that we associate every experience with, as far as it has to be this, and
Yeah.
if it's not, well, it wasn't worth my time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an assumption that we create based on, I think, a perfect reality, which it truly doesn't exist.
Yep.
And I'm there's so many things for so many other episodes that we'll get into, but I've been curious, even this whole concept of perfection, when did that evolve? How was that? Why was that a thought once upon a time that, hey, there
The
is
need to
that
be
thing
perfect.
that need
The
to be
need.
perfect? Yeah,
Uh-huh.
because
Um,
perfection, what I've learned is that it actually happens in the most imperfect moments. You're doing, in my opinion,
mm,
you're doing something without the idea of having it be this thing, and then there's that 1 30-second to 1 minute window sometimes where you sit there and you tell yourself, damn, that was perfect,
hmm.
but you didn't plan
That's
for that.
that's really cool. I don't think I've ever actually thought about that, like that perfection happens in like those moments of imperfection. I actually
Yeah.
never even considered that. It's the question around like where it started for me around perfection. I feel like it probably was like since I was a child. Growing up, being the best was was an expectation.
Yeah.
Education wise, anything that, and I say we because just to kind of like family wise in general, anything that I might have been enrolled in, the idea of being number one,
Uh-huh.
um, was just the expectation. And so when it wasn't achieved, um, I knew about it. Like I would know that it wasn't achieved, right? Like it's something that was always there. And so I grew up that way. I grew up with that expectation of being number one.
Yeah.
And so then that requires like perfection in things that you do, and perfection in the sense of everything has to be just right. Um, and so I feel like that's been my experience since I was a child. And so the unlearning of that is a process. What I'm grateful for is that I am aware of it. I'm aware that the differentiating between perfection and mastery, perfection and excellence, perfection and the
Yes.
experience, perfection and the
Yes.
process. I am very grateful for recognizing that. And so earlier when I talked about like the bigger picture, and I talked about like how I kind of look to see how does the life of Christ emulate these things for me. I actually, it's supported through for me in that way too as well. Is like there's no expectation for
Hmm.
me um, to be perfect, except for what was placed on me by my earthly like guardians and parents. Even like it's an earthly requirement
Yeah.
that got set up very early on. It's never been something that was innately required of me. I know that when I think about from a faith perspective, I don't think that God has an expectation for perfection. It's just not possible. You said like I'm not sure who exactly is perfect, so we are already setting ourselves up for failure. So it's not actually a reality. So I think what I'm grateful for is the experience of realizing that is not necessary. The idea of actually living it out is a process for me. I can't say that I'm in a place where I'm now always like, no need for perfection. I can't say that I'm there either. But the awareness of it has been really awesome because, to your point, I can recognize it.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as it's there, I can have the opposing thought as well. And I share that as an encouragement to a lot of people, because I feel sometimes when we talk about getting over anything, when we talk about getting over my insecurities, getting over anxiety, getting over these things, um, we have this expectation of perfection in the getting over of it, as in I am going
Mm.
to now one day, this is no longer going to be something that I'm going to deal with. And I
Uh-huh.
feel I'm coming to the reality that I don't know that I'm ever going to be there. I
Yeah.
don't know that I'm ever going to be in a place that, my insecurities that kind of scream out at me, that they're going to be gone forever. I feel just like me, they're evolving. And so they're going to keep evolving. And so what I'm recognizing is that, so instead of me trying to come to a place where this will never exist, how do I come to a place where I accept it and
Hmm.
I realize, like, how can this be part of my journey? This is part of my story. And the reality is that actually is what connects with people. If I was a perfect person that did not experience these things, or said, you know what, now I am never insecure, I actually don't know how relatable I could be with people. I feel like it would be really hard. Like it would actually be disheartening, I feel, to some people, to be like, oh man, she can do that, I can't do it, why can't I get past it? And then we would always just be stuck in that place. So where I am right now with perfection or my own insecurities and stuff is just really coming to terms with that. Okay, you know what, maybe I can just be okay that it's going to be here, and some days I'm going to have periods where it screams really loud and I'm just like, I can't do this, right? And
Yeah.
it's going to overwhelm me. But I am like, can I maybe experience it? Like maybe I can sit with it. I can sit with it and like experience it, and then have an opposing way of like what else can happen from here,
Hmm.
as opposed to being like, I'm never getting past this. This is never going to be. I mean, even though, okay, I'll be honest, like that may be some initial thoughts I'll have. I'm just like, this is it. This is never working. I'm never going to get past this. Definitely, those are my initial thoughts, but they are no longer the ones that, like, they're no longer the prevailing ones. They don't sit with me forever. So I recognize that I'm in the process of it, and I've realized that I'm always going to be in the process of it. I'm never going to be in a place where perfection is no longer a thing that I think about. I just
Yeah.
know that there's another way. So that's kind of where I would say I'm at.
And if you're perfect, then there's no need to do better. or to be better or to
Yes.
strive for any of that. And that's I think the
Yes.
thing of it all is that it's perfection, in my opinion. I don't think we can ever achieve it, because that thing of you can do better, you can be better, you can see a different view, there's always a story within the story. That's always going to be true. And if that's always true, then this concept of perfect, it literally, they can't, in my opinion, if there's one thing that can't coexist, it is those two things.
That's
It's
a
the
really good
concept
point.
of always improving and then being perfect at the same time.
Yes, because yeah, you're right. Perfection is like this finale,
It's like the ultimate thing. It's the end of,
right?
it's the rainbow at the end of the road. It's, it's the dead end. And it's like,
Maybe
there's
we need to be
no,
worried. We need to be worried when that happens, because that means like we're done. This is the end of the road.
that's your life. And maybe it's been interesting to talk to people who have had near death experiences. And one of the things that happens is they have this almost like summary of their life in the last, days or weeks. And in those moments of gratitude, the forgiveness to all the people that they've held weight or shame or blame against,
Interesting.
it comes out. Because I think it's one of those things where you can, when you can see the end and an event such as an catastrophe. It's fascinating actually how catastrophes shape your mind, because they really give you an understanding that this may be it.
Mm.
It almost like, I don't know how it works, and I don't want to put any sort of theories that aren't actually theories. This is just coming out of my brain as who I am, but just it's almost like an outer body experience. Your
Mm.
body, it gets shaken up in such a way that it doesn't even know what it's for. But it's the catastrophe. It's interesting how it happens, or tragic events,
Yes.
how they really wake you up. I've
Yes.
always been curious, like, why does that happen? Why do you
Yes.
get you wake up and you have such an experience that you literally choose to either change your life completely, act upon that thing, or have that realization?
Yeah. I mean, I
Because
think about even the
theoretically,
time.
that end and that last day, um, we don't know when that's going to happen. This could
Yeah,
be our last
exactly.
breath.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so, uh, I think about even the experience that we're all going through right now with the coronavirus. So it's a pandemic, it's worldwide, everyone's being affected by it. Maybe it's not, actually, I shouldn't say that. For some, it has been tragic. Some who have
Right.
experienced it, it's been a tragic process. I've and I so when I think about your question, I think about it in those terms. I say, well, right now where we're at, like what are we faced with? And I feel we're faced with we're being forced to take a look. We're being forced to, it's this disruption, right? And somebody actually said this really in pre-coronavirus. Somebody had said
Right.
this. She had said, um, Danielle Strickland, she had said, uh, confusion and disruption are an invitation from God to see things differently. And so the world that we're in right now is, to your point, is this kind of a shakeup that's happened. And it is an invitation for all of us to see things differently. We all have a choice around, what we would, how do we want to see it? How do we want to, what does that look like? But it is a forced place that we're in. And I feel like that's what tragedies and pandemics and all these things are. They're just like a forced moment of consideration and change. And what we choose to do with it is still the choice. Like, it's never actually, I mean, unless for some who've actually experienced loss, who've actually experiencing things that
Correct.
they're like, well, I wouldn't have chosen that. I can know that exists in people's lives right now. uh, and there's also choice that there's a lot of us that are being faced with, at this point. And I feel like that's what comes with tragedy. Like, I feel like in all our lives, I mean, I can even speak from my experience. Like, when my dad passed away, about it's been now 11 years, and his passing actually was very, like, it was a shakeup. Like, it was a very significant shakeup for me. And it that was a big change moment in who I was back then. And I feel we all have that events in our life. I personally feel like I have something every 7 to 10 years in my life,
Uh-huh.
significant. Not like, I'm not saying between that time nothing's happening, but significant things, 7 to 10 years. And uh, I was actually due for one. 2020 is when I was due for one.
Really?
And it internally since 20, like towards like middle and end of 2019, just I was having a lot of like turmoil and questioning around purpose and what I'm like, all these things. And so I knew I was due for it. um I'm not talking about, this is not pandemic related. I just feel like personally that was there.
Right.
But I feel we all have that. There's an internal thing, or sometimes it's external. It just is this thing that happens externally, that we're all, it's like a shakeup to be like,
Mm-hmm.
so what do you do with this at this point? And I don't know what the answer is to that, right? Like that's individually, we're each of us. And I think that's why it's great to talk to other people to kind of understand what's their experience, because people are having very different experiences. I'm having a different experience from people that I speak with.
Uh-huh.
um, and I think that's the value of learning. Like, can you learn from other people? Like that might be the opportunity as well that exists, instead of figuring it out by myself as to be what's the answer to that. I actually have no clue
Yeah.
what the answer is.
And I don't think there is that ultimate answer.
Mm,
The way that I kind of look at life and the understanding that I've been able to develop is that life is a book and you have different chapters that you go through it. You have the chapter of the shame, the guilt, the embarrassment.
mm,
You have the chapter of finding a little bit of your purpose or how you want to serve. You have all these different chapters, which it goes back to the story and just ultimately what I believe in is the power of individual stories
mm.
that we tell internally and how we externalize those to other people, because they can help shape the narratives of other people's stories, other people's books.
Yes.
I think that the concept that oftentimes I hear from people is you need to write a book, you need to write a book. Who's to say that I'm not writing a book right now?
Mm.
Let's face it. You are writing a book every day. You're just not putting it in a form that someone else can
Right.
digest it. But for
Right.
those that are close to you and those that you have the ability to stay in touch with, they are active characters within your book. They're reading your chapter at the same exact pace that you are,
Right.
word by word, page by page. And so I
Right.
think it's important to understand that these concepts that I think we oftentimes place as far as, different limitations, or you have to do this, you have to do that. Who's to say that?
Hmm.
You have to write a book. Who's to say that you're not writing a book? You have to
Mm-hmm.
monetize a podcast. Who's to say that you're not monetizing the podcast through relationships and connections and everything that you're building?
Mm.
So there are always multiple perspectives to it all. The thing that you mentioned about reality, and this is why I think and Grow Rich will really resonate with you. And there's a passage in there that says, um, a person is not defeated until he or she accepts defeat. So therefore, everything's temporary, and
Mm.
everything is as real as you make it to be. So,
Yes.
you know, so there was a pain. There was a point that I read a while ago. It said something: suffering is temporary, pain is inevitable.
Right.
Same exact thing. It's whatever you're experiencing now, whatever you're going through. You have a choice. Do you dive into the fear? Do you operate from that as far as the
Right.
world man? Or do you operate from, hey, maybe this was the restart button that I needed?
Right.
I mean, I don't know how many different groups or opportunities I've been able to be a part of just because of this, that I've craved for. I
Hmm.
craved for those things for like years. Some of them I didn't even know I wanted. And
Right.
then when the person says, hey, I want to start this, or would you be a part of it, or do you want to be a part of it? It's like, yes. And so I think there's beauty with it all. But the most
Yes.
important point of it all is, in regard to the bigger picture and everything, is that there's always a choice.
Hmm.
And you have that choice. In whatever you choose, whatever you put your focus and energy on, you're going to manifest.
Absolutely.
So it's amazing. But I appreciate you sharing all these insights. And before we kind of give you the opportunity to tell as far as how people can connect with you and learn more about your show, I just wanted to say that we've had so many different topics within this that are really, really important, I think, to life in general, because it's just so the biggest takeaway that I got from this is the ability to question, always
Mm,
question, and not for the sake of questioning why, but it's more so, why do you do what you do? Why
yeah,
do you think this way?
right.
Why does this person in your life, or why are they still there, or why? And I think that's that's a just an incredible ability that all of us have, is just the ability to stay curious
Yes.
about life, because
Yes,
curiosity will lead you places that you didn't even know existed.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I think for me, as we were chatting, what was just being reinforced was this idea of the journey, the process, right?
Hmm.
And that actually is what life is. Like majority of his life is in destinations. It's actually the process of
Experiences,
getting, you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like you're working through it. And I know certainly I've been somebody in the past who was just like, what's the destination? What's the destination? And kind of missing the journey along the way. And and being more open to, okay, let's experience the journey, because that's actually where all the living is happening. Like let's enjoy that aspect of it. And so that feeds into curiosity is a big part of that. To be like, let me be a bit more curious around, instead of assuming that this is so,
Yes.
could I actually maybe ask another question, to find a little bit more? And sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times, it's not really about now you and I have to see everything exactly the same. That's actually not what it is. It's, can I just ask you to just even understand? Like if I don't even understand, how are you seeing the world? Like
Right.
that's the possible that someone sees it this way. Like, that's actually a pretty cool thing, that someone can see something one way that I don't see it at all. And that to me is the curiosity, and the opportunity for learning. It's not always about we all now agree on everything. That doesn't actually make any sense. Like we
Hmm.
can't all agree on everything. That wouldn't work. So yeah, I really appreciate the conversation we had today. I've been jotting a few things down here on my own to be like, what does that mean for me? And I really appreciate the conversation. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you. Nancy, what's the best way that people can get in touch with you, with your work, and also listen to some of the podcast episodes that you guys have?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the best ways to connect with me personally would be through LinkedIn. I'm very present and active there. So if you just looked up Nancy John, just as it sounds, two first names, like you can find me on LinkedIn. You can check out my website. Like if you're interested to find a little bit more about the work that I do through Seed Leadership, that's just seedleadershipdevelopment.com. You can find me there. But again, if you go onto my LinkedIn site, you can find the website there as well. And my podcast, Relational Introvert, I'm just going to be launching season 2 on April 27th, so in a little bit over a week from now. You can find it on majority of the platforms: Apple, Google, Anchor. All of that's available through there. But again, you come and look at my profile on LinkedIn, and you'll be able to find everything you have on there as well. And I'd love to have people come and
Hmm.
journey with me on this podcast, because it's been a learning experiment, and I've really enjoyed it. So I hope that that's what people get out of that for themselves too.